sources.
Partly cloudy, but clouds continuing to roll in throughout the day. High of 53. Tomorrow we are expecting some wet weather to arrive by the afternoon, and then we will see rain at times Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, straight into next weekend. Looks like a wet Thanksgiving week.
From ABC News, This Week with Sam Donaldson and Cokie Roberts.
This morning, 6 weeks into the U.S. bombing campaign, Taliban forces are fleeing their strongholds, and Americans are asking, have we won the war? Secretary of State Colin Powell will join us to answer that question and others, including where is Osama bin Laden and who will rule Afghanistan?
Also this week, at issue, President Bush's order to try suspected terrorists by military tribunal. It was used against Nazis during World War II, but is it now a threat to civil liberty?
That's This Week, featuring George Will. And joining the roundtable, ABC's Terry Moran. Now from Washington, Cokie Roberts and George Stephanopoulos.
Welcome to our program. Sam Donaldson is away this week. We're joined by George Stephanopoulos. Welcome, George.
It's good to be here, Cokie. Thank you. We're going to start with the news today. Fierce fighting overnight in the northern Taliban stronghold of Kunduz may be turning the tide in favor of the U.S.-backed Northern Alliance. Joining us now with the latest is ABC's national security correspondent, John McWethy at the Pentagon.
Thank you, George. There are reports of a new offer from the Taliban group that is trapped in Kunduz. This is the northern city in Afghanistan, the city where as many as 10,000 Taliban soldiers may be trapped. The offer apparently is if the Northern Alliance will allow these soldiers to go free, if they can guarantee that they will not be killed, and if the UN is involved in supervising the surrender, they will surrender. This is an offer that is being passed to the Northern Alliance via radio. American officials say they are somewhat skeptical of this kind of negotiation. This particular group of Taliban soldiers before has been treacherous, they say. They offered to surrender last week, and when Northern Alliance forces entered the city of Kunduz, they attacked them. So it is today's development. It is unclear where it is headed. Number two, in Kandahar, the southern stronghold of the Taliban, there had been reports that the Taliban soldiers were fleeing to the mountains. That does not appear to be true this morning. That is another situation that is very fluid. American officials say, of course, their main focus now is turning toward the search for Osama bin Laden. This is something that they are having a growing sense of confidence about because they are getting more intelligence, at least in part because they are able to talk to more defectors and people that have been captured. And finally, another development this morning from the Northern Alliance in Kabul. We are hearing for the first time that they are willing to hold talks about forming a transitional government outside of Afghanistan, and this is a new development there. So now to my colleague, ABC's David Wright, who is in Kabul for more developments on the ground.
John, the situation here in Afghanistan is still in a state of flux. Not only is there continued fighting in Taliban-controlled areas, but also in some of the secure areas, some of the Northern Alliance factions are now fighting with each other. Meanwhile, here in Kabul this weekend, there were a few developments that pointed to a renewed sense of normalcy. The president of Afghanistan returned to the capital this weekend. Burhanuddin Rabbani has never relinquished the title, even after the Taliban forced him into exile 5 years ago when they seized power. The United Nations is back as well. A delegation of UN staff landed yesterday at Bagram Air Base.
There is a definite sense of urgency in the Afghan crisis in many, many areas. I've mentioned the humanitarian component. The political one is also particularly urgent.
We have talked about the security arrangements for Kabul in all liberated areas with the United Nations, and we are open to the ideas of further consultations in that regard with the UN.
But elsewhere in Afghanistan, the war is far from over. In Jalalabad, now liberated from the Taliban, several different warlords are vying for control of the city. Northern Alliance forces from Jalalabad have now started a search mission of suspected Taliban caves and mountain hideouts. And in newly liberated areas, officials continue to find stockpiles of weapons and documents left behind by al-Qaeda fighters. Some of these terrorist safe houses were destroyed by American bombs. This used to be Osama bin Laden's summer house in Jalalabad. Among the items found at a house here in Kabul, a copy of Microsoft Flight Simulator 98, also a list of flight training schools in the U.S. Circumstantial evidence, to be sure, but the clearest sign yet of a possible connection with the events of September 11th. Koki?
Thanks to David Wright in Afghanistan. Well, what does happen next in Afghanistan? And what about Osama bin Laden? A short time ago, Secretary of State Colin Powell joined us to answer those questions and others. Thanks so much for being here this morning.
Good morning, Koki.
We've heard that the hunt for Osama is getting closer. Is that the case? Are we about to get him?
Well, I think his options are being narrowed as more and more of the country is released from Taliban domination. He has fewer and fewer places in which to hide. We think he's still in Afghanistan. There aren't many countries around Afghanistan which would welcome him at the moment, or for that matter, any country in the world, with one or two exceptions, that would welcome him. So I think, as the president has always said, the noose is getting tighter. We're going to get him out of his hole sooner or later, and we'll get him.
We heard David Wright say that he's found evidence in those safe houses of some link to September 11th. They've also seen in those houses evidence of looking at bombs. Do you think Osama has a bomb?
I have no reason to believe that he has a nuclear weapon. There's no doubt that he would like to have had one, and I'm sure they were trying to see what they could do to bring the components together to produce one. But based on what I've seen so far, it's most unlikely that he had one or was anywhere near getting one.
Now, Osama is, the American people see very strongly as a sign that we've won if we get Osama bin Laden. But the news of the past week is sounding like the war is getting won. Is it effectively won?
One part of the conflict, I think, is moving along rather well, and that is to get the Taliban regime out of power and to make it much more difficult for the al-Qaeda network to function in Afghanistan. We're not going to lose sight of the objective of destroying the al-Qaeda organization in Afghanistan and getting Osama bin Laden. But as the president has said from the very beginning, our campaign is much broader than that. We want to go after al-Qaeda wherever it exists in the world, and it is in some 50 countries, and any one of those cells in those 50 countries could be planning a terrorist operation right now during this Ramadan season. And so we're not going to lose sight of that objective, and we're not going to lose sight of the broader objective that the president put before the American people and put before the world that has brought this coalition together, is that we're going after terrorism around the world. And so this is the beginning, a successful beginning, I believe, of a very long campaign. And we have to be patient, we have to be persistent, and at the end, I'm confident we will prevail under the president's leadership.
I want to come back to that in a minute, but I want to stay in Afghanistan for a couple more minutes. In terms of what's happening there on the ground in the fighting, there are reports today that there's a CIA paramilitary force in there. First of all, is that true? And secondly, what role are they playing?
Well, I don't want to confirm what the CIA does or does not do. Let me just say that they have been doing some rather splendid work with respect to our activities in Afghanistan, working alongside our military forces that are inside in Afghanistan that we've reported on rather extensively. I think we got a very fine link up between our intelligence assets, our military assets, all within the framework of a good political military strategy, and it's now starting to show rather significant results.
Now, there are those who say that the diplomacy is behind the military action, and you've had the return of a former Afghan leader, Rabbani, coming in, talks about a meeting coming up this coming week, maybe in Europe, of various Afghan factions. Is that going to happen, and what is the significance?
We think the diplomacy is catching up with the rapid pace of military operations. United States Ambassador Jim Dobbins, who is our special envoy to the region and to work with the Northern Alliance, had a meeting this morning in Tashkent with the Foreign Minister of the Northern Alliance, Mr. Abdullah. And Mr. Abdullah has agreed on behalf of the Northern Alliance to send Northern Alliance representatives to a meeting that's being convened by Mr. Brahimi, the Secretary General of the United Nations representative on these matters. Now, where that meeting will be held is still being debated. And the purpose of that meeting is to bring together the factions as quickly as possible so that as quickly as possible we can create an interim government that can go in and begin to take administrative control in Kabul. And then over a longer period of time, you create a more comprehensive, broad-based government.
And
So things are now starting to move on the diplomatic front rather well.
And while that interim government's in place, does that require peacekeepers on the ground, including U.S. peacekeepers?
It may well require some military presence on the ground if that seems to be appropriate, both in order to bring in humanitarian supplies or for the purpose of just providing a level of stability in the towns that are being liberated. And I think we'll have to make a judgment on each of those places as we go forward. In Mazar-e-Sharif, coalition forces are coming in. That's the town in the north that was the first one that was liberated. And they have come in really to help with the delivery of humanitarian supplies and provide more security in that region so that the non-governmental workers and human rights workers and humanitarian workers and UN workers can get in to deliver food.
One of the extraordinary things that happened over this weekend was the First Lady giving the radio address and talking about the women of Afghanistan. And you've issued a State Department white paper on that subject, which says, and I want to put it up here, the Afghan people want, and the U.S. government supports, a broad-based representative government which includes women in post-Taliban Afghanistan. Does that mean the United States says to Afghanistan, you must include women in your government?
We will say to the Afghan leaders that if you truly want a representative government that will be respected in the eyes of the world and that reflects the aspirations of all the Afghan people, you have to include women in this political structure. Now, this, I think, can be done. There are Afghan women who are more than able to contribute to such a government, and we're not going to dictate what they do with their government. It has to come out of the Afghan people. But we hope they will realize, having gotten rid of the Taliban, having gotten rid of these deprivations and these degradations that they were putting on women and against women, it is now time to allow women to participate more fully in Afghan society, and that includes the political structure of a future Afghan government.
There are those who say this is all part of a propaganda ploy, and you do have a new Office of Public Diplomacy, but there are those who say no propaganda will work unless the Middle East, Palestinian-Israeli situation is solved. You're making a major speech tomorrow. You're expected to talk about this issue. We hear that you're going to say that you're going to waive the 7 days of no violence before the Mitchell Plan goes into effect. Is that the case?
Well, the two are not that directly linked. Osama bin Laden tried to steal the Palestinian issue, but he failed. And Chairman Arafat said clearly he wants no part of bin Laden and considers him an outcast.
What about
With respect to the Middle East, I will be making a speech tomorrow. I will lay out a vision that the United States has, and I believe the international community has for settlement.
Will you waive the 7 days?
I'll get to that. I didn't impose the 7 days, so therefore I can't waive it. We'll have to see how Mr. Sharon reacts to my speech and whether other actions he might take. What Mr. Sharon has said, and he was the one who said he needed 7 days of quiet before he would be in a position to participate in discussions with the Palestinian side. Mr. Sharon is determined to bring the violence down. He was brought into office on the basis of security for the Israeli people. And so we are in a delicate situation right now, and I hope that my statement tomorrow will lay out what the United States believes, our vision, a comprehensive statement of our vision. No new plans are coming. We have a plan. It's a plan that works, the Mitchell Plan. And what we have to do is to get the two sides talking to each other, security officials to security officials, in order to get a ceasefire in place. With that ceasefire in place, lots of things happen quickly, leading to negotiations.
Now, does that mean no conditions for going to the Mitchell Plan?
You cannot. The United States is not in a position to impose upon either of the two sides specific conditions. We can encourage them. Israel is a democratic nation, freely elected leaders that makes their judgment. And we can encourage, we can prod both sides. And Mr. Arafat is the leader of the Palestinian Authority. We do encourage and prod both sides to move both of them in a direction where we can get the violence down, confidence built back up between them, trust restored, so that we can start into the Mitchell Plan and get to negotiations, which is the sole purpose of the Mitchell Plan.
Mr. Secretary, you've been saying that since the first interview we had here in February.
And I'm sorry, it hasn't changed since the first interview I gave in February. The violence has continued. It's time to bring an end to the violence, and until that violence is ended, we're not going to get forward movement into the Mitchell Plan.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being with us, Secretary Powell.
Thank you, Cookie.
Now that we've heard from the administration, we ask the question of others. How well is this war really going, and what happens next? Up next, Foreign policy experts Richard Pearl and Jim Steinberg, who each have very different views, questioning the military's assessment that the end is in sight.
It's been said that we are tightening the noose, and in fact, that is the case. We're tightening the noose. It's a matter of time.
This Week with Sam Donaldson and Cokie Roberts. Brought to you by GE. From lighting to financial services, we bring good things to life. And Merrill Lynch Wealth Management. Advice in personal financial planning to help simplify your life.
This is experience. This is discipline. This is how investors make it through volatile markets. At Merrill Lynch, we guide our clients through market uncertainty by reassessing their risk, their asset allocation, and their financial goals. This is what a Merrill Lynch financial advisor does.
This is what you do.
And these are the times when we do it best.
Fast-moving, ever-changing world of global e-commerce. Here's something you don't see every day. The CIO of a Fortune 500 company leaving at 5 o'clock. Why isn't he in his office, worrying whether microchips from Asia are tracking through India to factories in Europe? Because when his company made the shift to e-commerce, they didn't go with some fly-by-night. They went with GE Global Exchange Services. With unparalleled expertise in e-commerce, GE built them a seamless, trouble-free network. On budget, on time. So he can move on to more important business.
Who's that?
Hey, come on, Bobby boy.
That's Bob's dad. Bob's dad's here. Bob's dad's here.
Hey.
Why aren't you?
GE Global Exchange Services. E-commerce without the E-worry.
We just heard Secretary Powell say that the United States has made great progress in getting rid of the Taliban. But to get a sense of the challenges ahead for President Bush and his team, we turn to a man who's paid to think about what can go wrong. His name is George Friedman, and he's the chairman of Stratfor, a private sector intelligence agency that Barron's called the shadow CIA. I asked him to analyze the hard questions facing U.S. strategists now, starting with, has the Taliban collapsed?
From the beginning of the war, we thought that the Taliban would not try to hold on to the cities, that it was insane from their point of view to do that, that under pressure they would use their forces to screen and buy time for their forces to disperse into the countryside. We see this as a strategic withdrawal into guerrilla warfare, which doesn't mean that it's going to succeed. It simply means that that's the intention of the Taliban.
Is it better to capture Osama bin Laden or kill him?
Well, capturing bin Laden, I assume, will lead to a trial. And in that trial, bin Laden will have an opportunity to state his case for the world and, most importantly, for the Arabic people. He is an extremely eloquent man, and many of the things that he says is persuasive in the Arabic world. That trial is going to provide a tremendous platform for him. I think, on the whole, it would be much better if he were killed in fighting.
Should Saddam Hussein be a target?
Al-Qaeda certainly hopes we attack Saddam Hussein, because Al-Qaeda's entire position is that this is not a war between Al-Qaeda and the United States. It's a war between the United States and Islam. And one of the things they very badly want to achieve is having the United States attack multiple Islamic countries so they can show the Arab masses that, in fact, that's the issue, that the United States is the enemy of all of Islam. There's very little evidence that the Iraqis are behind Al-Qaeda. Certainly Al-Qaeda has worked with Iraqi intelligence, but Al-Qaeda has worked with lots of people. If we go after Iraq, we not only have a military challenge, we challenge the coalition. Saudi Arabia is going to be very unhappy. And finally, that really doesn't connect to the major issue of breaking Al-Qaeda.
So how serious is the Al-Qaeda threat?
What we don't know at this point is how many additional task forces have already been deployed to the United States and are in the process of carrying out operations. We do know this much. At least 19 people were in the operation to hijack the planes. It's very unlikely that Al-Qaeda would have put all their eggs in one basket. That could have gone wrong and they would have lost everything. We have to assume that there are multiple task forces still in the United States, really unaware of each other, and wholly unaffected by what's happened back home. The money's already here, the people are already here, the plans are already here. So I would argue that we have certainly made progress over the last few months, but as the President said, this is going to be an extremely long, extremely difficult, and extremely painful war, and events in Afghanistan should not confuse us with victory.
And for more on what's next, we're now joined by Richard Pearl, a former Assistant Secretary of Defense in the Reagan administration, who now serves as chairman of President Bush's Defense Policy Board, and Jim Steinberg, President Clinton's Deputy National Security Advisor and the Director of Foreign Policy Studies at the Brookings Institution. Both join us this morning from California. Good morning.
Morning, George.
Jim, let me start with you. George Friedman said we can't confuse progress with victory. You've said in the past that we have to be careful that to avoid a strategy where we win the battle in Afghanistan but lose the broader war. How could that happen?
I think the important thing is to make sure, as Mr. Friedman said, that we focus on al-Qaeda and that we do this in a way that allows us to work with other countries to deal with the fact that al-Qaeda is around the world. So we're going to have to not only deny the sanctuary in Afghanistan, but deal with the al-Qaeda cells in Europe, in East Asia, and that means making sure that we keep others working with us on this problem.
How important is the coalition, Mr. Pearl?
Well, I think it has its different roles at different times. We certainly needed some real estate from which to operate in Afghanistan. Once we've destroyed the Taliban regime, our requirements in that regard are going to differ. We mustn't come so dependent on a coalition that we're unable to achieve our objective, which is to end sanctuary for terrorists in a number of countries around the world.
An important key in that coalition is, of course, Pakistan, and they have been historic enemies of the Northern Alliance. The Northern Alliance now seems to be taking control of Kabul. Do you think that's a problem for Pakistan? Mr. Pearl?
Well, if it is a problem for Pakistan, the Pakistanis are going to have to deal with it. We are there to protect the American people, and to the degree to which our coalition partners have similar interests and similar objectives, that's fine, but there may well be points of divergence between our interests and those of members of the coalition, and I hope that American interests here will prevail, and we will do the fundamental thing, which is protect the American people, and not fail to do that in order to please somebody else.
Jim, let me turn now to the end game with bin Laden. Many assume he's going to go down fighting, but you said that the United States will pay a price if it looks like we're spoiling for his head, even if he can be captured. What would that price be?
I think that the international community has been with us because they see our cause as just and that we're pursuing our interests in a way that also are shared by them. And I think that we clearly have the right to use force if it's necessary in dealing with bin Laden, but if he wants to go to trial, I think we need to be prepared to do that, and do that in a way that vindicates our values in this conflict.
Mr. Pearl, you're shaking your head.
Yes, I think it's time we got realistic about the world we're dealing in. Mr. Steinberg served in an administration that was offered bin Laden for extradition to the United States and turned it down. Unbelievable, but it was turned down. I don't believe we owe bin Laden any of the courtesies of the American constitutional system. I think we should kill him if we can get close enough to do so. I don't believe we owe him a trial, and we certainly don't owe him the protections of our Constitution.
Jim, President Clinton turned down the opportunity to get Osama bin Laden?
President Clinton has been the one who's been trying to get bin Laden. The issue here is making sure that
Answer
we do
the question, Jim.
I think the issue is that we did not have an opportunity to get bin Laden in a way that we could hold him, and what we did not want to do is give bin Laden an opportunity to show that he was going to be exculpated by our courts. So we need to focus on what we need to do for our interest.
Why wouldn't the United States have been able to hold him? Explain that.
It's not clear, George, whether we had an offer to have him, but even if we had at the time, we had no indictment against him. We had no charges against him. This was back in 1995 and 1996. And so if we had tried to hold him and the courts had released him, that would have been a big setback for our efforts to deal with that problem. Now we have charges against him. We have an indictment against him, and if it's necessary, we have a basis to proceed.
Mr. Pearl, we heard George Friedman say that attacking Saddam Hussein would play into al-Qaeda's hands. Why is he wrong?
Well, first of all, I think what we are trying to do is end the practice by which states support terrorists who then attack Americans. One of the states supporting terrorism is Iraq. They've been supporting it for a long time. They attempted to assassinate a former president of the United States. And perhaps most important, Saddam Hussein has weapons of mass destruction and is working urgently to acquire even more of them. He can now put those weapons in the hands of terrorists, and he poses a very fundamental threat to the United States. and we ought to go after him. I don't think it has any bearing at all on al-Qaeda, whether we go after Saddam or not. And if we are successful, and I believe we can be, the people of Iraq will regard us as liberators, and you will see the same kind of joyous reaction that you're seeing in Afghanistan as we free Afghanistan from the grip of the Taliban.
But just this week, the State Department turned down $8 million in funding for the Iraqi opposition. Why isn't President Bush and his State Department taking your advice?
Well, I think they're running on momentum from the last administration. Steinberg knows all about that. They wouldn't allow the Iraqi opposition to do anything. And the same people at the working level are still in positions of authority. I hope this is now going to change because the threat is so clearly fundamental to our very survival. Weapons of mass destruction in the hands of Saddam Hussein, plus his known contact with terrorists, including al-Qaeda terrorists, is simply a threat too large to continue to tolerate.
Jim, why shouldn't it change? Why wait for new evidence? We know, as Mr. Perlis said, that he has been involved in past terrorist attacks.
The issue, George, is how do we best make sure that he doesn't do that? And the way we do that is keeping the rest of the international community with us. Saddam Hussein is much weaker today than he was 10 years ago, but we need to keep the pressure on. What we need to do now, for example, is to work with Russia, our new friend and ally, to make sure that we have tough, new, smart sanctions, that we get inspections back in there. We have an opportunity, but with this strong coalition, that we have to put the pressure back on him in a way that weakens Saddam and keeps our interest in the forefront.
Mr. Perlis, you're shaking your head again. Can the United States do this alone?
Look, what you've just heard is the sort of insipid internationalism that got us into the situation that produced September 11. This subordination of American interests to concepts about globalism and the international community and international law. One of the reasons why we were hit as hard as we were is that for the decade that Mr. Steinberg's administration was in power, al-Qaeda grew stronger and stronger. The Taliban, which was nothing at the beginning of that administration, became a sanctuary for terrorists. They organized against us around the world. It's time to understand how the world works.
George,
and we are not going to be protected by the United Nations.
Richard's muscular language is all well and good, but the fact is that the reason that we are effective in the world is because of the respect that we have both for what we stand for and how we work with others. If we're going to deal with the kinds of threats that al-Qaeda poses and the danger that there'll be new al-Qaedas in the future, the United States has to continue to provide that leadership that, of course, protects our interests, but also respects the fact that others want to work with us here and want to share our values. If we create an environment where we stand up and say, well, we don't care about what others think, we're just going to do it, we're not only not going to be successful because we won't have the support to make these kinds of military operations possible, but we'll find more and more of the world is organized against us, and we'll be weaker for that.
One of the areas where people have been calling for leadership is the Middle East. What should Secretary of Powell say tomorrow, Mr. Steinberg?
I think what he needs to show is that the United States is engaged here. I think he's right to say that we can't impose an answer on the parties, but they need us to help move this forward. They're in an environment right now where both are being damaged by the cycle of violence. Both need a trusted party like the United States to be involved. I'd like to see the Secretary appoint a special envoy to go to the region, to work with the two parties, and to begin to move out of the cycle of violence.
Mr. Perlis, you get the last word.
Yeah, I don't believe in this cycle of violence business. The fact is that the Israelis are trying to defend themselves against terrorism in exactly the way that we're trying to defend ourselves against terrorism, and they have every right to insist that their citizens stop being attacked before they re-enter some negotiating process.
Gentlemen, thank you both.
Thank you, George.
We'll have more on the war in Afghanistan later in the show. But first, we're going to take a look at the controversy sparked at home by President Bush's decision to set up military tribunals to try suspected terrorists. George Will and ABC News White House correspondent Terry Moran join us after this.
This is a war against terrorism. Where military justice is called for, military justice will be dispensed.
I've been your doctor for 30 years. You still hate the thermometer. Okay, you drink lots of fluids. Take it easy for a day or two. And we need to balance your portfolio. Here's a few long-term bonds I find attractive.
Wouldn't it be great if the person you trust most was your broker?
Let's look at your current allocation.
At Schwab, we give advice that's objective, uncomplicated, and not driven by commission. Call 1-800-7-SCHWAB to set up a consultation to check the health of your portfolio.
And lay off the junk bonds.
By all appearances, I'm a server. But look deeper, and you'll see that I'm an entire company. A direct one-to-one relationship that adds value instead of costs. I'm just the part of the company you'll be looking at when you realize that I'm not just another pretty face. I'm a better way of doing things. Enterprise systems that are easy to build, easy to own, easy as Dell. Dell PowerEdge servers use Intel Pentium 3 Xeon processors.
Enter a new era of discovery at Bristol-Myers Squibb, where groundbreaking genetic research is underway.
Winning the Tour de France was a victory for cancer medicines. But Luke, it's just the start of incredible things to come.
At the Bristol-Myers Squibb Center for Applied Genomics, researchers strive to unlock the secrets of breast cancer, Alzheimer's, and diabetes to lead the way in new frontiers against disease.
Hope, triumph, and the miracle of medicine. Bristol-Myers Squibb Company.
Tonight on ABC. At 9/8 Central, in the life of this secret agent.
Every time I think I know just how awful you are,
The truth is always changing.
I learn something worse.
Alias. Then at 10/9 Central, tensions escalate between partners. I don't trust you as much. One will betray the firm.
You should have come to me before.
One will betray a friend.
We don't turn on each other.
The Practice. It's a new Alias, followed by a new Practice. Tonight, starting at 9/8 Central on ABC. ABC presents a story about the things that matter most.
I can't lose him.
Brian's Song in 2 weeks, 7/6 Central on ABC.
At issue this week, do suspected terrorists have constitutional rights? That's the question raised by President Bush's order to try captured terrorists with special military tribunals. ABC's Jackie Judd explains.
Franklin Roosevelt did it, as did Abraham Lincoln and George Washington. During wartime, each president established military tribunals to hand out swift justice that frequently ended with executions. Attorney General Ashcroft says the U.S. faces the same need now.
And foreign terrorists who commit war crimes against the United States, in my judgment, are not entitled to and do not deserve the protections of the American Constitution.
In a tribunal, military officers are judge and jury. The proceedings can be held in secret. Unanimous verdicts are not required. Appeals are impossible, and prosecutors are free to introduce evidence from intelligence sources that in a civilian court could be off limits.
Those kinds of things are not readily admissible without elaborate foundation, without the disclosure of government classified and national security information, without the production of informants, all of which undermines our ability to both obtain adequate punishment, but also undermines our ability to deter terrorists.
But critics on the left and the right say President Bush is moving too far, too fast, with too little justification. Influential conservative William Safire calls tribunals kangaroo courts that betray our principles of justice. Senate Democrat Patrick Leahy finds himself in rare agreement.
We don't protect ourselves by bending or even shredding our Constitution. We protect ourselves by upholding our Constitution and demonstrating to the rest of the world we will defend ourselves, but we will do it by also defending our own core values.
The administration also cleared the way recently for the monitoring of certain attorney-client conversations, and it is now easier to keep suspects in custody. September 11th has challenged the country in all kinds of ways. Now that includes finding the right balance between national security and civil liberties. For This Week, I'm Jackie Judd in Washington.
And joining us now to discuss all this is George Will. Good morning, George.
Good morning.
And ABC's White House correspondent, Terry Moran. Terry, let me start with you. As Jackie points out, this is part of a pattern in the Bush White House since September 11th. Where did this particular idea come from, and what's their defense against the charge that it undermines the Constitution?
Well, it came from the earliest days. This is part of an aggressive effort launched by the president himself right after September 11th to take up all of the traditional extraordinary wartime powers of the presidency, which always raise constitutional and other questions. And this in particular, we are told, he was very anxious to have as a provisional measure. One of the things that White House officials remind us This may or may not be used. There may be domestic trials or there may not be domestic trials. This is, however, one of the tools in the arsenal that the president was very, very interested in having.
George, do you agree with your fellow conservative Bill Sapphire that it's a kangaroo court?
Disagree with him in particular with Mr. Leahy saying this is bending and shredding the Constitution. This is a constitutional exercise of the war powers vested in the president, as exercised by, among other, our three most admired presidents, Washington, Lincoln, and Franklin Roosevelt, unanimously affirmed by the Supreme Court in 1942, exercised under Congress's law passed in the Uniform Code of Military Justice. We heard the case made for this inadvertently by Mr. Steinberg in the preceding segment when he said, and in fact, bin Laden was offered to us, and the administration, Mr. Berger, almost reasonably said, don't send him because we can't try him in our courts that are made for trying burglars, car thieves, and drug dealers.
But there have been examples of the courts trying the people who perpetrated the 1993 World Trade Center explosion.
Well, it's a problem, though. It is a big problem because you bring Osama bin Laden here and start trying him in open court, and the chances of more terrorism coming about as a result of it are enormous, and the ability to make his statements and to all the things you've heard are true. And I think it's probably constitutional to do this, but I think it's unwise. And here's the reason. Up until now, we have been trying very hard, finally, to get out the American message. The propaganda war is one word for it. But the great thing about the propaganda war from our perspective is all we've had to do till now is tell the truth. We have nothing to hide. We can talk about the values of this country. We can talk about what life is like for American Muslims. We can talk about all kinds of things that are very, very positive. And this isn't so positive. And it seems to me that when we're trying to get out to the rest of the world, particularly the Muslim world, a sense of what our core values are, as Senator Leahy said, that we don't want to then be in the position of saying, but when it comes to you, we're not going to exercise them.
But this was drawn, and I get this from one of the lawyers in the Justice Department who drafted it. This was drawn almost entirely to deal with people we are going to capture on the ground in Afghanistan, which is why it's important. This isn't about people in the United States. This is what do you do?
But they haven't excluded that yet.
They haven't excluded that, and the president himself wanted it not excluded just to retain the option. But this is not about people in this country. It's about people in Afghanistan.
And it is not a legal measure so much as it is an instrument of war. It is confronted with the problem of a lot of people who want to kill a lot of Americans. The best thing to do with them is to shoot them when you find them. But the U.S. abides by the laws and customs of war, which prohibit that unless they're shooting at you. And so this is a way to incapacitate the mortal enemies of the country by incarcerating or executing them with a record of justification.
Suppose we capture bin Laden, and suppose he really is, in a sense, the Ford Foundation of terrorism, as he's been called. He makes grants. He doesn't oversee the details. You can imagine what the O.J. Dream Team reassembled for this circus. Dershowitz and Johnny Cochran and all would say, well, his fingerprints aren't actually on this, and all the due process evolved by judges over the years for dealing with car thieves gets applied
I
to
agree.
this.
Having Osama bin Laden on trial in the United States of America is a nightmare.
But that's
and with any luck, you know, he is found dead. But there are international tribunals, and he could be carried away to The Hague.
And President Bush raised that. Last week at the United Nations. Let's play that clip for a sec.
Every known terrorist camp must be shut down, its operators apprehended, and evidence of their arrest presented to the United Nations.
Now, Terry, he seemed to be suggesting there that we would have these international tribunals. Does this new order rule that out?
Well, or some presentation of evidence. And this new order does not rule that out, although as someone who has covered the International War Crimes Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia for several years, it may not be the best way to go. It is a very slow, very, very confused process.
But look what Nuremberg did. It gave such legitimacy to the trials of the Nazis, and there was a sense of right and order prevailing over horror, and I think that was done in a way that was according to the law, and we would like to see that.
A small footnote: the British only agreed to the Nuremberg tribunals after Hitler and Goebbels were dead. They were not going to see them put on trial.
All we have time for right now. I'm sure we'll have more on that in coming weeks. We're going to come back with the roundtable in just a minute for more on the war and how's it going overseas. Stay with us.
I'm not very big, said the little blue engine, but we must get over the mountains before the children awake. I think I can, I think I can, I think I can. She tugged and pulled and tugged, and slowly, they started off. Hooray, hooray! And the little blue engine smiled and seemed to say, I thought I could, I thought I could, I thought I could.
One energy company had the idea to change their entire fleet of global tankers to safer ones with double hulls, committing to it before anyone else and finishing 16 years ahead of the industry's deadline. Conoco, think big, move fast.
Schultz never knew there were tunnels. He didn't want to know, but you're missing the point of the story. A young entrepreneur engrossed in a Hogan's Heroes marathon neglects to ship an important package. Did he know about the radio and the coffee pot? He knew nothing. Now focus. Like a swallow returning to Capistrano, he instinctively heads to FedEx. They give his small business package the big business treatment, and another hobgoblin of success falls victim to FedEx efficiency. What is a hobgoblin? A gnome. A mean, angry gnome.
This Week with Sam Donaldson and Cokie Roberts will continue in a moment after this from our ABC stations.
This week, America prepares for its first holiday season post 9/11. How safe are we in airports, on the road, in malls? Watch World News Tonight.
California is 1,000 miles closer to energy solutions because Williams Pipeline runs from wells in Wyoming, over valleys, through mountains, and under deserts. And now we're doubling its capacity. From Devil's Kitchen to the City of Angels, Williams is leading energy solutions.
Over the river and through the woods, to grandmother's house we go.
Now head home for the holidays in any new Jeep vehicle and take along the security of 7-year or 100,000-mile powertrain protection. Plus, through November 19th, 0% APR on select O2 models.
Hooray for the fun, is the pudding done? Hooray for the pumpkin pie.
Team 2 examines the return to prayer tonight at 11.
There's been news on the domestic front this week. There's been another anthrax letter found, this one addressed to Senator Pat Leahy, who we saw earlier. There was, of course, the airlines crash of the American Airlines jet, and that led to this passage of the airline security bill, which had been batting about in Congress for many weeks. But, of course, the big news in Washington continues to be the war and diplomacy. So where are we with that? George Stephanopoulos, you just had a very lively conversation on this subject. Where do you think we are?
Well, it's been an astonishing week. Just think about it. A week ago, the Taliban were in control of what, about 85% of Afghanistan. Today, they're in control only of about 10 or 15%. And I think that is obviously great progress, even if it's not victory. I think what it points out, though, is now we've had 2 wars in a row, where you've had all these pundits and people in the commentariat saying it's impossible to win a war without U.S. ground troops, massive U.S. ground troops. Now we've seen both in Kosovo and Afghanistan that targeted high-tech air power combined with proxies can work.
And is that going to do it? Are we home free?
We're not home free yet, but we're a long way. Again, looking at the benchmarks. A few weeks ago, we were talking about the nonsense of not fighting during Ramadan. It's Ramadan and we're fighting. Nonsense cubed was the idea that we should put moderate Taliban people in some thing built in the 7th floor of the State Department building. Perfect rubbish. But the crowning nonsense of all was the thought, maybe we could get the Northern Alliance to stop at the suburbs of Kabul and think about it. Well, of course, they've been fighting for years, and they're going to storm into the capital. That's the object of revolutions.
And that represents a major problem, that the liberating force wants to assume, quite naturally in any situation, the dominant position of power, and that's going to be a big problem. The United States has won a lot of things. The Taliban no longer control the urban areas, but they may, as this fellow pointed out today, start a guerrilla operation. A lot of the al-Qaeda operations have been disrupted. Bin Laden is still at large. There's a long way to go, and one of the problems is constructing some kind of government that does not fall into the hands of warlords.
Is it possible to construct a government in Afghanistan, A, and B, one that does not have various warlords in various parts of the country ruling those
Well, there has been one in the past. I mean, and that's the advocates of bringing back the former king. Zahir Shah say that back in the days when he was king a long time ago, 40 years ago, there was some relative progress and relative peace, but of course it's going to be very difficult after the last 10 or 20 years now of bloodshed. But George, you make fun of the moderate Taliban. The fact is now that there are moderate Taliban who've joined the Northern Alliance. That's what all these defections are about.
Well, we're not sure they're moderate. We're just sure that they don't want to
They didn't want to die.
Besides, yes, look, constructing a French government was a problem in August 1944, but that wasn't a reason to wait on the outskirts of Paris. Get the Nazis out of there, and then we'll deal with it. And get rid of the Taliban, and whatever comes next is going to be better.
One of the really chilling things, though, that George Friedman raised in that interview is that the cells here in the United States are on automatic pilot, that the killing or capture of Osama bin Laden may trigger the next attack, which makes at least me a little more comfortable with some of the measures that John Ashcroft has taken over the last few weeks.
You're talking about more terrorist
attacks, yeah.
I found this business of the women and talking about putting women in the government in Afghanistan fascinating. And Mrs. Bush, you're at the White House. What was the whole conversation about having Mrs. Bush do the radio address? First Lady to go solo on the radio address.
And it's part of a concerted effort across this government and the coalition governments of putting out the message that the treatment of women has been disgraceful in Afghanistan, and that noble goal is one of the efforts that the coalition is after. That said, there's an element of double talk in this, which is that some of the key allies, Saudi Arabia chief among them, do not have that much different status for women in their countries than the Taliban.
I also wonder what would have happened if Mrs. Clinton had tried to make a similar sort of address. I think it would have not gotten the same kind of response.
You're probably right. Terry brings up an important point about Saudi Arabia and Egypt. We've been living with a level of hypocrisy for the last 20 years. We allow Saudi Arabia and Egypt to give pleasant-sounding noises to us, but then to fuel this fundamentalism among their own populations and then fund it overseas. Right. And one of the challenges ahead is for the United States is how to stop that.
Now, the other, of course, big news is...
Well, I'm just going to say that you brought up Nuremberg a moment ago. Who sat on the Nuremberg tribunals? The Soviet Union, which Hitler's allies. He started the war of aggression for which they were being tried. Go ahead.
So, well, speaking of the Soviet Union,
yes.
The president of Russia was here this week. Lots of nice talk. Any action?
Well, yes, and the action was interestingly semi-unilateral. The president said, we're going to cut our strategic nuclear arsenal by about 2/3, and Putin said, we're going to match that. He said it a few hours later, and there was no doubt a choreographed minuet. But what the president said was, you want to write all this down on a piece of paper, that's fine, but this is what our government is going to do. Now,
well, the question is, will he do it, though?
Oh, I think he'll do it, and he's constantly being criticized for unilateralism, but he's decided unilaterally this is how we'll defend our country.
There was some movement, though. That statement, if you want to write it down, fine, is some movement from the American side, as Putin has moved saying, okay, well, maybe we do need to talk about defenses, but let's write it down. And it looks like the deal that is in the offing, in its very nascent stages, is some kind of communique short of a 3-foot-high SALT-type treaty that Bush will ink and that Putin will ink. And that
Putin is going to move on the ABM treaty, because if he doesn't move, we're going to do it anyway.
It doesn't sound like he cares that much about it. If the truth be told.
No, it sounds more like he cares not to have it. He seems so churlish about the notion of a treaty, and this is kind of a reflexive anti-arms control position of this government. You know, just this week at the same time, they refused to go to a meeting on the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty, which has been signed but not ratified. Now, this is not going to stop someone like Osama bin Laden from getting nuclear weapons, but it could control the buildup between India and Pakistan and in China, and that's important.
I would like to move to the culture for a moment. This week we saw Jonathan Franzen win the National Book Award for his book, The Corrections. He has caused, some you see on the front of that book, Oprah's Book Club. Now that is the jackpot for an author, to have Oprah's Book Club on the front of a book. But he said he didn't want to go on Oprah, George.
He's a familiar cultural type. He's the intellectual snob who starts a kind of adversary stance with his own country, which he says is a prison. One of the characters in his novel says America's a prison. And it's a Philistine culture. And then, embarrassingly, the Philistine culture turns around and makes him rich by buying his books in profusion. When Oprah made this a selection of her club, the first reaction of his publisher was to order 500,000 more copies. That's $1 million right in the bank. And of course they're selling. Oprah Winfrey has done for adult reading what Ms. Rowling has done for children's reading.
The author of Harry Potter.
People who like books and bookstores and the public reading novels ought to thank Oprah.
George is right about both Jonathan Franzen and Oprah. Franzen was clumsy, he was hypocritical, he seemed very ungrateful, but I think this is one of those areas where we have to separate the artist from the art, because the novel is magnificent. It is funny, it is very insightful, it's very moving, and he should have just written it and keeping his mouth shut.
Well, I'll leap to his defense here. First, we shouldn't hold him accountable for what his characters say. Shakespeare would be quite a monster, as would a lot of others. But second, he is in the predicament that artists have been for 150 years or more, doing the arduous work of trying to locate, fix, and express something authentic about the human experience, a human truth, and not have it become commoditized.
Wait. He wanted to go on Oprah. He filmed the interview.
He's not doing a book tour. He's not going out and doing these things. I think he was just essentially saying that he was, that he
wanted it both ways.
What Terry calls his predicament is that he's been rich, lionized, free to write with complete creativity in a country that rewards him. That's a heck of a predicament.
But you have to know that what drives somebody like that, and what drives somebody to pick it up, is that intimate, uncommoditized, magical encounter between author and reader, which risks...
I don't understand the verb commoditize. That's what we have bookstores for, isn't it? To sell the darn things.
It is, and there's no question that Dickens had his books commoditized. And
serialized. Yes.
All right, we're not going to solve this one, but when we come back, especially now, you'll all be happy to know George Will is not planning to retire anytime soon. But he's recently had some thoughts on how to do it properly. He'll tell us after this.
How fast can you make brilliant color prints in your office? With a Xerox Phaser 2135 color printer, you can make 21 color prints per minute. That's more than 3 times faster than HP's fastest color laser printer. Hey, catch us if you can. The Phaser 2135, one of the family of Xerox network printers.
Enter a new era of discovery at Bristol-Myers Squibb, where groundbreaking genetic research is underway.
Winning the Tour de France was a victory for cancer medicines. But Luke, it's just the start of incredible things to come.
At the Bristol-Myers Squibb Center for Applied Genomics, researchers strive to unlock the secrets of breast cancer, Alzheimer's, and diabetes to lead the way in new frontiers against disease.
Hope, triumph, and the miracle of medicine. Bristol-Myers Squibb Company.
Troy, I know you got out for a reason. You're worried about getting hurt. But it's a year later. I really think it's time. If you don't get back in, you're going to regret it. Remember what I told you. Think mutual funds. Stay diversified.
Any tax implications?
Wouldn't it be great if the person you trust most was your broker?
Is there a healthcare fund that looks attractive?
At Schwab, our mutual fund advice is always objective, uncomplicated, and not driven by commission. Call 1-800-4-NO-LOAD to find out which fund is right for you.
U.S. champion Timothy Gable faces world champion Evgeny Plushenko in their first meeting on the road to Salt Lake City. Nations Cup today on ABC.
You know the music. You know the superstar. Now meet the man.
There we go.
Thanksgiving night. Take an all-access look inside a one-of-a-kind life.
I like that.
Being Mick. You would if you could.
It's a nice position to be in.
Thanksgiving night at 10/9 Central, only on ABC.
Now, this week's George Will commentary. George, I understand you found one more example of how baseball's not just another business.
Indeed, George. Mark McGwire ended his career this week, and nothing in that long career was more luminous than the way he left it. He'd hit 583 home runs, 17 more. He'd have reached the milestone of 600, but last year he only batted 187. His knees hurt. He's been injured a lot. And so he refused to sign a contract extension that would have earned him $30 million. He said simply, I can't earn it, and besides, it would be bad for the team. Here's his statement. Look at it. I have decided not to sign the extension as I'm unable to perform on a level equal to the salary the organization would be paying me. I believe I owe it to the Cardinals and their fans of St. Louis to step aside so a talented free agent can be brought in. Well, last week something similar but also different happened, and it involved this man, Kenneth Lay, who's the chairman of the Houston-based Enron Energy Company. Enron has fallen on hard times, to put it mildly. Here's what its stock has done recently. As a result of this, it has been taken over, and as a result of the takeover provisions of his contract, he was entitled to $60 million. Well, he was about to accept that, and then there was, to say no more, some dissent in the ranks, and he decided not to. Now, it looks as though perhaps the Mark McGwire principle is becoming contagious. It is, maybe we should only take the money we earn. What a concept.
It's a dangerous concept, George.
Very dangerous. We shouldn't all be judged by it. Cokie and I'll be back right after this.
Well, it's time to go.
Oh, we love having you here. Oh, we'll be back. It's a great place. Thanks.
Have you always had this in?
No, we ran our own printing company.
This was always our dream for when we retired.
You should have seen it before. It needed a lot of work, but we did it.
I don't know if we'd be able to do it.
You'd be surprised.
Martin got us investing in T. Rowe Price.
Even helped us work out what we could spend once we retired.
Maybe we ought to think about that.
I think so.
T. Rowe Price, helping people invest with confidence for over 60 years.
Is there anything more beautiful than a baby's face? Well, as a matter of fact, there is. A baby's face lit by the amazing GE Reveal bulb. Reveal filters out dull yellow rays, leaving only clean, pure light. GE Reveal. There's nothing more beautiful than clean, pure light.
We're Pfizer. We're looking for a cure for your father's Alzheimer's, your sister's heart condition, your best friend's diabetes. We're spending nearly $5 billion on research this year and have 12,000 scientists and health experts looking for the cures of the future. Why do we work so hard? Because we have fathers, sisters, and best friends too. Pfizer. Life is our life's work.
When I think about what happened on September 11th, it's hard for me or anyone else to make sense of it all. But people do care about you and your safety. So talk to your mom, your dad, your teacher, or friends. A good talk can do a lot of good.
George, you know, we've seen those streaks over the skies of Afghanistan of the bombs falling, but here early this morning we saw different streaks in the skies, a meteor shower. It was really quite something. These are the Leonids, and early they were filling the skies. This is leftover dust from a cloud that was formed in 1766 that we're still seeing today.
And what's amazing about those streaks going, those shooting stars going across the sky, is they're no bigger than a grain of sand. They're actually very, very tiny. I have to confess, Cokie, I tried to get up this morning and look. I went out there. I couldn't see a thing with the lights of Washington.
I tripped over the outdoor furniture on my yard in the dark and saw two of them, so I feel pretty good about that. Well, that's the news from this morning. For the latest news, don't forget to watch World News Sunday and Good Morning America tomorrow.
Sam Donaldson will be back next Sunday. Until next week, that's This Week.
Okay.
In tennis, the advantage of the two-handed backhand is obviously power because you're using both hands. But it also is deceiving because in a split second, you can change the direction of the ball that you hit. Your opponent never knows if you're going to rifle it down the line or rip it cross court, and I like that.
Knowledge is the edge. At Invesco Funds, it's the approach we use to invest your money. You should know what Invesco knows.
To order a transcript of This Week with Sam Donaldson and Cokie Roberts, phone 1-800-CALL-ABC.
This has been a presentation of ABC News. More Americans get their news from ABC News than from any other source.
Defending champs Tiger Woods and David Duval team up again for the USA in the World Golf Championships EMC World Cup today on ABC.
L is for the way you look at me. O is for the only one I see. V is very, very extraordinary. E is even more than anyone that you adore.
Now get Chrysler PG Cruiser starting at just $16,800 plus 7-year or 100,000-mile powertrain protection.
Most mechanics can fix just about anything on your car. But throw something really complex at them, like a